All right. Good morning and good afternoon. Good morning for the United States. Good afternoon in the United Kingdom, Europe, and the rest of the world. Say hi, everyone. I know you can't all wave. Celynn may have you waving later. But anyway, thank you so much. I'm Amanda. Many of you know myself. And Kate, of course, you know. Say hello, Kate.
Hi, everybody. Hello from England.
And Celynn, also from London, the London area. Say hello, Celynn.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Hi.
So we want to welcome you to our very informal fireside, or wherever you're sitting, chat. It's time to press pause. It's time to kind of turn inward to ourselves and our family and just take a step back from our busy worlds, whatever you're doing. And that's what we want to do for the next hour. Kate is going to be chatting with us about how to de-stress the culinary journey, right, Kate? So putting on the chef hat, mom hat, clinician hat, and just having a chat with you about the kitchen. And there's an incredible recipe pack coming your way with the replay. And then Celynn, I'm going to wait for you to introduce yourself when we, just a little later. So Celynn has been a friend of ours for quite some time, and she's certainly someone I go to and say, can you help us press pause? Can you shed some peace and some wisdom and some kind of insights for us as we go into the holiday season? So we'll welcome Celynn a little later back. But thank you, all of you, for joining us, and sit back if you've got your tea or whatever. And I'm going to hand it over to you, Kate, and I'm going to stay on screen with you. Celynn, we'll see you back in a few. All right, over to you, Kate.
Thank you very much. So as everybody knows, cooking over any celebratory day can be really quite stressful, but somehow the Christmas festive season tends to add like a whole nother layer of stress on top of that. And I think particularly this year, where we may not have spent last year with our families, it's definitely going to add another level of stress on there. So I just want to give you some little tips and tricks to try and de-stress that, or lower the stress that can happen in the kitchen, to make your life a little bit easier, so that you can just really enjoy the day and the time that you spend with your family and your friends. So my first big tip for the kitchen is don't try something new on the actual day. If you're going to pick a new dish that you want to do, which is fantastic, and we should all be trying new dishes all the time, practice it beforehand, whether that's making a smaller version of it, or just make sure it's something that you understand how it works, that you understand how it's going to work in your oven, or whether it needs to set, or whatever it is. Don't do it for the first time on Christmas Day, because there's nothing more disappointing than trying to turn out a flan or I don't know, anything, whatever it is, and find that it hasn't worked. So just make sure that you practice it first. The other big tip is just organization is absolutely key to ensuring that everything goes really smoothly in the kitchen. And this is how all chefs work anywhere. We have numerous lists. There are just lists and lists and lists and lists. So start off by menu planning, obviously, work out what you're going to actually cook on the big day, or cook for the big day, I should say, and write a shopping list. Make sure that you've got everything in stock before you start cooking for it, but then start prepping as well. So mise en place means putting everything in place, preparing things before you actually go into the big cooking part is really useful. So working out in a list, what can you do first? What can be done on what day? So are there things that can be cooked the day or two beforehand, or even a week beforehand and frozen? What are your timings going to be? Do you need to, if you have cooked something and frozen it, do you need to defrost it before the big day? Does it need to come out the day before, or that morning, or actually is it meant to be from the freezer and it comes out only a couple of hours beforehand? Maybe it's a chocolate log or something that's frozen and it just needs a little bit of thawing before you're able to cut it. So working out these cooking times and working out what can be cooked ahead and then reheated or kept warm is really important. So the way I do it is I work backwards. So I tend to write this list out twice. So I start off with the end goal. So let's just say 5 p.m. is mealtime. Obviously, whatever time is, I'm not saying that you should be eating at 5 o'clock at all. I'm just using this as an example this time. So you might want, if you're cooking a turkey or some kind of roast, you might want that to come out at 4:30, so that it's got 20 minutes to half an hour to rest and for any juices to come out of that meat and to, not to come out of it, but to, I can't think of the exact terminology for it when they sit. But there's a sort of an amount of juice that comes out that you can then use for the gravy. And it allows the meat to, when you cut it, it doesn't dry up. So then you might say, okay, well, the turkey's coming out at 4:30. I've only got one oven. So then the potatoes go in at 4:30. So you need to pre-boil those if you're roasting them. So you might say 3:30, peel the potatoes, parboil them, get them oven ready, get them on that baking tray, seasoned, herbs, whatever you're adding on there, have that all ready to go beforehand. 2 o'clock, maybe start making the gravy. If you're reducing down a stock to make a decent kind of base to use, because there's never enough gravy, so always have enough. And then you might just add in at 4:50, you finish the gravy off by adding in the juices from the meat if you're cooking a meat one. If you're not in that lovely recipe pack that Amanda has already mentioned, there's a really nice mushroom gravy recipe in there which can be used, and you can always add meat juices to that, or it makes a really good vegetarian or vegan alternative. It may be that you want to be putting down things like perhaps you're going to brine your turkey. So you may want to put that as the day before. How soon do you need to take it out of the brine and let it sit before it goes in the oven? All of these things can be laid out in a list from top to bottom, just to make it super simple for you, that you know exactly where you are, what you've got to do at what time. And it just takes the stress off of the day for you. But then also what can be frozen beforehand. So some ideas would be things like pureeing some vegetables. So one of my favorites is steamed parsnips and carrots. I actually boil the carrots because it's almost impossible to get carrots soft enough to puree really well just with steaming. It takes so long that I do boil the carrots in just a really small amount of water and steam the parsnips over the top. I puree them with a little nutmeg, a little creme fraiche or some cream, or even coconut yogurt if you're dairy free. If you're not dairy free, a knob of butter in there as well. And it's such a lovely, slightly sweet, but not overly sweet little side that can go on. Always getting gravy bases done beforehand, and then they can be frozen. If you're doing a nut roast, that can definitely be made beforehand. Again, there's a really nice one in the recipe pack that I've done for you, which is a combination of sweet potato, chestnuts, and hazelnuts, and various other lovely things. And that can be made as a loaf, then let it cool, slice it. You could freeze it at that point, then you could take it out of the freezer, and once it's thawed, you can literally just put the slices onto a piece of baking parchment and just, heat them in the oven. It doesn't have to be crispy or dried. It can just be, 15 minutes in the oven to heat it through. Stuffing can totally be made beforehand and frozen if necessary, or made the day before. Things like we have in England something called pigs in blankets, where we take sausages and we wrap bacon around them. Things like that can be totally done, a day or two before and left in the fridge ready to go in the oven at the last minute. Any dips or sauces could be made ahead of time. Even on the day itself, you can steam your vegetables early on and put them to one side, let them cool down. Don't keep the lid on the steamer once they've steamed, because they will carry on cooking. So let them, put them on a tray or something like that so they can cool down, and then cook some garlic or something like that in some oil. Again, put it to one side. At the last minute, throw those steamed vegetables into that garlic oil, quickly heat it up and kind of stir fry it through. And it's a really quick and easy way at the last minute of just ensuring that there's beautiful flavor in your food, but also that it's nice and quick and easy to get it done at the last minute. Any starters you're going to do, I'd always recommend doing cold ones. You've got enough going on the stove when you've got all these different components. So whether it's a terrine or a quiche or something lovely like that, that could be made either the day before or cooked that morning so that it's done and out of the way, makes things nice and easy for you. So that's about it. It's just, make sure that you are totally prepared. You know exactly what you're doing. There's no surprises going to happen on the day for you. And then list making. I'm a big list maker, but it comes from working in kitchens. And it was actually another chef who taught me to do that. And she's just like, just start from the end goal and work your way backwards. And if it's backwards even a whole week, because you've got to order something a week ahead, if you've got it on that list and you cross it out, it's there and it's done. So that's it. And the recipe pack that will be coming out to you has got, so there's no meat recipe in there, because there's so many amazing recipes on the internet for roasting turkeys and other cuts of meat. But so I've done it more as a kind of a free from, so they're all gluten free. They all have dairy-free alternatives. And then obviously there's this nut roast in there as well as an alternative to meat if you are vegan or vegetarian yourself, or if you've got people that are coming to eat with you who are. So I hope that you enjoy some of those recipes. There's a chocolate mousse, a gravy, miso Brussels sprouts, the nut loaf. What else is there in there? A soup. Anyway, it's a really nice combination. And there's also some notes at the back again going over what I've just said to you.
And it is delicious, Kate, because I was looking at it last week. So if you're wondering where that recipe pack is, we'll be coming in the email tomorrow with your replay. And of course, you can reach out to Kate if you've got any questions. I had a couple of questions. So the chestnut hazelnut, is it pumpkin, right? Loaf is
sweet potato, but you could totally use it in there as well. So long as you can grate it, that's fine.
So, okay. So cool. A good point there. Cause I was thinking a lot of times we might use a canned puree, that's become very vogue here, but you're not going to, you want the texture of the root vegetable.
Yeah. I've made it before with parsnips and carrots in place of the sweet potato, and that works fine, but you want that grated root vegetable to really kind of hold it in place. You could probably use celeriac or a swede or anything that's a root vegetable, basically. Just it's the texture of the dish that you're looking for with it. A puree would just make it really sloppy, and I don't think it would hold.
Oh, it would.
No, you'd end up probably having to spoon it out of the loaf tin.
It's like it becomes a dessert, right? So that's my question with the loaf. Are you serving it like bread, or is it a vegan replacement for meat? What was you thinking behind the loaf?
So I'd say it's a vegetarian replacement because it's got an egg in it, but you can do it egg-free. So I originally made the recipe egg-free. And when I was retweaking it just before getting the recipe back over to you last week, I found that it wasn't falling apart, but it wasn't holding together as I would have liked. So I put one egg in and it just held it together a little bit more without making it too kind of dense or fluffy or anything like that. But what I do is I actually cook it in a silicone loaf tin. I use a lot of, like, rather than sort of metal tins now, I really use silicone because they're just so in the kitchen. So I do it in a silicone loaf tin. I turn it out, let it cool for a little bit in the tin, but in the silicone, but I find it does get a lot of moisture in there. So after about 10 minutes of being out of the oven, I put a breadboard over the top of it, flip it over, and then move it carefully onto a wire rack and let it cool. But then once it's cool, you can take a bread knife to it, and you slice it like a loaf, but then you can put those slices onto a baking tray and you can reheat them, 160, 180 degrees centigrade. So Fahrenheit is roughly double that. You don't want it to kind of like dry out in the oven. You're just looking to reheat it. Right. It's so delicious. And we were eating it cold. My husband's actually requested that I make it again because we were having it for lunch a few days, and he was just like, "That is so good."
It sounds amazing. I'm definitely doing that, making it ahead, freezing it, pulling it out, So my last question on that, I assume we can do that, right? To me, it's that kind of a product you can.
Yeah. I've not actually tried it myself, but I don't see why you wouldn't be able to. I'm just really careful when you do it. Potentially, I'd almost freeze it in the tin that
I would, yes. Yeah.
Because then you can always take it out of that again and remove that tin from the freezer if you need to, but it's quite soft. My initial thought would be cut it and then freeze it. Now you could do that. I have a lot of hard plastic trays from when I used to do a lot of catering, and you could cut it and put the slices onto a tray, free with some baking parchment always underneath it. And then you can just lift the baking parchment up, and then you could even put them in a bag afterwards and froze them as a slice like that. And then just when you're defrosting them, just make sure they're laid out carefully, potentially on a, there it is.
There it is. I want to show you. We're talking about this thing. It's beautiful. Go ahead, Kate. Sorry.
Actually kind of not letting it defrost in a pile of water because it might soften it a little. And that's the only thing. It may be softer after freezing because of the water content to it. It may just need slightly longer in the oven then. But I feel like it's something that could be frozen and utilized.
Sure.
But it's so good. I'd almost say make it beforehand,
and just set it aside.
Check out how it works. As I say, like don't do anything new on that day.
Sure. Do it before.
it's just, you know, it's open to so many problems then, isn't it? And it's not like you shouldn't be experimenting and doing wonderful, new, interesting stuff, but it's just, you know, experiment beforehand on a day when you don't have, you know, 15 people coming from you or whatever.
No, totally. And I love the idea to you make the starters cold, absolutely practical. If you've got a soup, it's easy to reheat that, but then you're thinking of stovetop space as well. So great.
You know, beautiful, like you can do layered terrines of sort of, I mean, if you eat fish, spinach and smoked salmon and like a shallot pasta, and, or, you know, you can make a vegetable terrine or something like that, where when you cut the slices, it's beautiful through it, or just, you know, a lovely quiche or something like that.
Exactly. Kate, there's one question here. If there's an egg white allergy in the household, will the loaf work with egg yolk alone? Would you double the egg yolk? Yes.
You can totally do it without egg in it at all. It just is, I put it in because it just needed a little bit more holding. Another way of doing it would be to make like a muffin. So if you've got like a muffin mold, like a silicone muffin mold, so you almost get like a little kind of, like a little pie almost of it. So that would be another way of doing it, particularly if you weren't putting the egg in. It's only when you're cutting it, sort of like, as you imagine it's like a sort of a loaf and you're cutting it. It's only when you're cutting it that it starts to fall apart a little bit. So you could totally bake it in whatever shape or size that you want to.
Make little balls. Yeah.
Oh, even like little balls. Yeah, you could totally even do like little meatballs or patties with it, or anything like that would work.
Awesome. Cool. Anyone else? I know you're listening to us talk, but we wanted to talk to you and not have you like, you know, when somebody gives you something to look at, then now what did Kate just say? And you're looking at the recipes. It's a fantastic recipe pack, so it's coming your way tomorrow. And I have one final kind of tongue-in-cheek question, Kate. So when you're making this list, you start at the end and work backwards. Do you assign duties to spouses, siblings, kids, grandkids in the list? Like, does Ruben get a job, or is he too busy?
On Christmas Day, no way. You totally can, of course you can. But I think once you've got that list done, if someone comes into the kitchen and says, can I help you with something?
Oh, yes.
You can actually then just look at your list and go, oh yeah, do you want to peel the potatoes? Because I've got to do that in 10 minutes anyway.
Gotcha.
Or, you know, you can see on your list where you are at a glance at any point. And it just takes that, it removes it from your head by putting it on paper.
Yes,
so you just have that freedom to be able to think a little bit more clearly around it. And at any moment where, I don't know, you know, you've got people in the kitchen with you and they're all laughing and drinking, it's lovely, and you're joining in, you're like, oh, what was I doing?
What was I doing? Yeah.
You crossed out everything that's already done. Oh yeah, I've got to do that now. Oh, it's 3:30. I've got to, you know, whatever it is that you have to do at 3:30. So, you know, it just gives you some space to think and to enjoy yourself at the same time. And totally you could kind of, you know, be assigning duties, but I think it just, yeah.
There's a little tongue in cheek. Cool. Amazing. So Kate, of course, is going to be in the background here. You all can get a hold of Kate very, very easily, as you know, but look for that recipe pack tomorrow. Thank you, Kate. I'm lucky today. I'm just hosting and I'm going to disappear here now because we're going to bring on Celynn. Celynn, here she is. Are you hungry? Unmute yourself, my friend.
I'm salivating. Yes.
I know, right? Well, you could just pop over, just got on the train to Farnham to Dorset. And yeah, but no, it sounds amazing. What I love about it, Kate, is, you know, I grew up, so Kate is in the UK. Celynn is from South Africa and living in the UK, and I grew up in the UK. So like all these flavors are yummy. And us who are in the States, we can totally reach in and embrace everything in this recipe pack. So enough about food, because some of us haven't really gotten into breakfast yet in the States. So I would like you all to, Kate and I would like you to meet Celynn, Celynn Morin. So Celynn, how do they pronounce it in the UK? Celynn Morin?
Morin. Yeah.
Morin, Celynn Morin. So I personally met Celynn in South Africa a number of years ago. In Johannesburg, we were at an event together, and Celynn reached out afterwards and said, well, I'm going to be working in the UK. I would love to use some of your work, which was great. And many years later, I introduced Celynn to Kate. So we all know each other. But when Kate and I thought about doing a fireside chat, just an impromptu, hey, let's just sit back and relax. And, we're not trying to teach you anything, that you need to take notes on, other than if the ideas are popping up from today. That was our focus. So there's no better person in the world, I think, to lead you on a journey into looking at the holiday through some different eyes, finding some joy, effervescence. Celynn calls herself I love the CEO, Chief Effervescence Officer. I mean, and she does come around with a glass of champagne. I've seen you. So I'm being French by birth, being French or having parents from France, it all fits in beautifully. So Kate and I are going to disappear from the screen. I'm going to hand over the rest of this time to Celynn. Kate and I will pop on at the end, but you're really in for just an incredible journey. So Celynn, it's always a delight to know you, to work with you, and to have you as a guest with us. So we're going to hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Amanda and Kate. And it's really lovely to meet everybody else, because even though we're not in person, there's nothing more powerful than an intention. And our intention is that we are together in person around a fire. So just like if we were sitting together around a fire, some of us would be chatting, one person might be telling a story, so would be listening. And however you are right now, whether you're here live at the fireside or you're watching the recording, all of you is welcome. I am going to share ideas, but what I know is that I don't have all the best ideas. The wisdom is always in the collective. So at any point, please put a question or a comment into the chat, those of you that are here live, and I'll keep my eye on that. And my intention, my aim for the time that we have together is for you to be able to leave with one new idea that can help you keep the spark of the flame and the fire in your heart and your belly ignited at just the right temperature for you to feel joyful. And so that's personal, right? Some of us need different things. So I'm going to share a lot of ideas, but I don't want you to leave with a lot of ideas because we're already stressed and tired. Like Kate's saying, we don't want to have more lists than what we need to do. So I'm going to ask you at the end, what is one personal pledge that you're going to make to yourself and take and do differently and put into action as a result of our time together? And that's your one thing. That's what's going to help you feel as if you are your own CEO, Chief Effervescent Officer, during the holidays, but beyond, right? Because we've been on quite a ride and it's still going to keep going. If you have pen and paper handy and you are able to make notes, I find that quite helpful because we always think we're going to remember when we're in the moment, but especially when we have a lot of information coming at us in one go, like we're about to go through, you may forget. So feel free to write some notes. Of course, you can always come back to the recording. And you can always reach out to me. So through Amanda and Kate, you can always reach me. So I'm going to share my slides to add to the flame of the fire. Perhaps, well, Kate, you let me know if you can't see the slide. Let's troubleshoot. But right now you should see my name on the slide. And I'm going to keep.
We can see them, Celynn.
Excellent, excellent. Can you just see one slide?
We can see one slide. Yes.
Okay,
Your
good.
Full screen. Off you go.
Great. You've always got to check with tech because sometimes you just don't know. It has its own personality, right?
That's right.
So just as if when we're driving, it's helpful to know where the destination is. So the destination for today is that there is no destination, because when it comes to well-being and health, no one arrives, right? It doesn't matter who we are, whether we're clinicians or not. It's really about the journey. And when we're driving, as you might have experienced recently, I did this week, we had some harrowing weather and floods, and so there was a lot of traffic jams and diversions on the roads. And I caught myself going into that stress response, clenching the steering wheel, clenching my jaws, getting all contracted and tight and getting a bit upset that I hadn't given myself even more than enough time. And then I realized, you know what, I can stay in this tight response and with my inner critic shouting at me and get to where I need to be even more exhausted. Or I can choose to relax, slow down my breath, focus on what I can control, because I can't control that there's been floods. I gave myself enough time, as I thought, and we can't always change everything. So important to also be able to find calm despite the chaos around us. And the holidays can be quite a tumultuous time. So some of the techniques, especially the one I'm about to share with you, is a very practical, hands-on one. And that's what well-being is, right? It's about a way of being. We don't just read books about it and then be well. We need to get up and make the kind of food and create the list so that we can have healthy recipes and engage with each other as colleagues and into the knowledge from Amanda and Kate, for instance. And what we're going to take a look at today, because well-being is such a vast topic, and I was thinking, what does this fireside chat need? And my intuition thought that it would be a good idea if we looked at ways to manage the stress response within us, so ways to find calm in the chaos. So no matter what's going on around you, to look at the reminders of the intelligence that we see in the seasons, and how we can use that as a framework to help us get better rest. And then I'd like to share with you the different types of rest that many of us need. Some are obvious, like sleep, but some are not so obvious. So there's 7 types of rest that I thought we could reflect on. And then how do we put this into practice? Well, it requires wholeheartedness. What is that? We'll take a look at what wholeheartedness is. I'll touch on the importance of boundaries, and then we'll be able to make a personal pledge. So I hope that sounds good, and that sounds like a bit of a fun journey as we sit here together.
That was amazing.
Oh, great. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, let's go.
I'm going to set my timer for 60 seconds, so for 1 minute. What I invite you to do in this minute is to bring your awareness to your breath and count how many breath cycles you take over the 60 seconds. An inhale and an exhale is 1 breath cycle. So without changing your breath, because there's no right or wrong, it's not a competition, bring your awareness to your breath and count how many breath cycles you take, starting in 3, 2, 1. So we're taking an opportunity to pause, bring your awareness to your breath, and count how many breath cycles you take. I'll let you know when a minute is up. And if your mind wanders, without criticism or judgment, gently bring it back to my voice, perhaps back to your breath. There we go. That's a minute. If you'd like to, you're welcome to share in the chat how many breath cycles you took. So the general recommendation is, if we want to manage our stress response, the fight or flight response that many of us are pulled into many times a day, is to be aware of our breath, because the breath gives us 2 things. It gives us a window into the state of the nervous system, and it directly impacts the nervous system when you consciously control your breath. So thank goodness we don't need to think about breathing. That's controlled by the autonomic nervous system. However, when we do consciously slow down the breath, especially if we breathe deeply into our belly and lengthen the exhale, magic happens within just a few breaths. Some of you may know about the chemistry behind this, but your body produces dopamine and oxytocin, your blood pressure drops, your parasympathetic nervous system gets activated, which is the rest and digest. Basically, your whole system gets a little bit of brake as opposed to accelerator when you consciously slow down your breath. So I see that some of the numbers that are coming in are really good. 10, 12 breath cycles, 11. According to the Heart Math Institute, we want to be hitting single digits, and if possible, 6 to 8 breath cycles in a minute. So that would be breathing in for, say, 4 or 5 counts, and then out for 4 or 5 counts. So I know when I'm sometimes really stressed in the middle of the afternoon. So those of you, I know that Amanda and Kate, Kate's here at the end of the day for you. Amanda's in the morning. If I've had maybe 2 cups of coffee and I've had back-to-back meetings, my breath cycles can sometimes be close to 20. And this is a very lovely quick check that you can do. I call this the mindful minute. And when we start slowing down our minutes, we can then potentially create pause and rest in our hours. And hours make up our days, and days make the weeks and the seasons of our life, right? And when we talk about seasons, you may agree with the quote, I do, even though it's difficult, that in the depth of winter, we can finally learn in ourselves that there is an invincible summer. So when we go through difficult times, like so many of us have experienced over the past 18 months, even longer now, we can, when we're able to come through the difficulty of it, look back and potentially see strengths and attributes and learnings and perhaps silver linings. And so that quote can be applied to many things, like in the depth of tears, I finally found in me an invincible smile. Or in the depth of anger, I finally found in me an invincible forgiveness. And what it shows is that as humans, we have this polarity of emotion, right? And it's normal. Everything happens in cycles. We're going to be taking a look at nature, and nature reminds us that things change, seasons come, seasons go. And when we consider what we've been through, something that our generation has never experienced, even before COVID happened, I was doing a lot of work in the workplace, which is where I spend most of my time working with clients and leadership teams around well-being in the workplace. People were very stressed and tired. And using words like burnout was becoming more of the norm. And now, absolutely, that's the forefront, right? And we're busier than ever. Some of us have, we go from using several screens in the day to then relaxing in front of screens in the evening. We certainly don't spend enough time around actual fires. We need to really buy out that time. And so if you find that you've been feeling a lot of polarity of emotion, I wanted to just spend a moment telling you that it's really normal. You may have heard about a condition that some psychologists are speaking about called post-pandemic flux syndrome, which is where many of us are feeling in flux, where some mornings we'll wake up feeling great and some mornings we won't. Sometimes on a weekend you might want to socialize and be with people, and then another weekend you just want to hide away and be under a blanket. And staying compassionate and curious, I'm going to speak about how important curiosity is, can help you to also realize that it's okay. Considering the amount of stress that we've been through, it's all right to not be feeling okay all the time. And so being able to express our emotions in a healthy way becomes quite important. And to realize that when others around us, people that we love, people that we work with, strangers, they might be having one of those really bad days. And it's not about you, but potentially about them. And I'm not going to go into the detail of the stress response, but we know when we experience something stressful, the brain sends a message down to the adrenal glands. They might be tiny little glands, but boy, can they release a lot of hormones that can cause havoc if we have too much of them. So a little bit of adrenaline and cortisol is important, because if we were confronted by, say, a raging wild animal, we would be able to run away from it or to be able to attack it. We may not be approached by wild animals, but we are approached constantly by social media, by news, by this virus that keeps on mutating and changing. I mean, just yesterday, I realized that I'm not going to see my family in France for Christmas. So, just when we think that maybe we can plan things and they can actually roll out, something else happens. Or for me, whenever I'm on Teams, potentially, I find that Teams doesn't always work. And so I can feel my body going into that stress response. And over the last 2 years, we've had an enormous amount of adrenaline and cortisol, and it's okay to be feeling depleted. What's not okay is to keep on ignoring the signs, because if we leave them for too long, it affects us, in every dimension, our physical well-being, our emotional well-being, our mental well-being, and then the sense of meaning or connection, because the stress response has such a huge impact on every single system in the body. So I guess the important thing is to also be able to identify, a little bit of stress is okay. It's when we have too much. And this is where something called the window of tolerance can be quite helpful. You might have heard about this. When we're in our window of tolerance, it's a bit like bandwidth. You're able to absorb information. You don't feel triggered into the fight or flight response. So you have a sense of being grounded and present. You have full mental cognitive ability. Your energy levels are great. Your digestion doesn't get affected. You can sleep well. You can manage all the different pressures and responsibilities that you have. However, when we move out of that zone, so when we're no longer what I call a cool cat, you can see that cat's kind of like chilled and relaxed, but alert, they've still got an eye open there. But when you become a bit more like what I call a suspicious squirrel, where you're constantly in the state of what we call hyperarousal, which is where we're overstimulated. And I've noticed myself in the beginning of COVID, when everything changed last year, I was in that state a lot. I just became a workaholic. I dealt with the stress by working. And then this year, I've been feeling a little bit like what I call the pause panda, which is where we may drop into the sense of hyperarousal, where you just have no energy to do anything at all. So rather than being frantic and wired and potentially erratic, or you might get angry, you tend to just withdraw, shut off, potentially feel numb, not really know what you're feeling. The important thing is to be able to identify where you are when you shift out of your window of tolerance, because not only do you not show up at your best, it has a huge impact on every single system in your body, including the gut, which I know, is quite important. And Amanda alluded to the fact that I'm French South African. So my family are from Champagne in France. So I love all things to do with champagne and wine. And I was brought up in South Africa. And in fact, that photo was taken just before the pandemic hit at the end of 2019. And you may notice the roses at the end of each row of vines. And some of you may know why they're there. I'm sure Amanda does. But the roses are there because they get affected by a bug or a mildew before the vines will. So they are a great alarm system. They're red flags for whoever's looking after the vine. Because if something goes wrong with the roses, then the vineyard manager can be like, hang on, I've got to pay attention here. Because if I don't, I could potentially lose the whole crop. So as we go through the information I'm about to share with you, stay curious about, well, what are my roses? What are your red flags, your alarm system? How do you know when you're having just a little bit too much stress for a little bit too long? The World Health Organization defines burnout. And burnout really is a spectrum. I mean, I've been to the edges of burnout myself, not just once or twice. And I think it's like going through that deep, dark winter, finding what we potentially did wrong and could do differently next time. And that's how we learn about resilience and finding in ourselves an invincible summer. So the World Health Organization defines burnout as a sense of physically, we get very exhausted. So exhausted that even sleep doesn't alleviate it. Emotionally, we have a sense of cynicism. So things that used to give us joy and gratitude and celebration don't. And then mentally, we have a sense of not performing at our best. So it's a sense of being ineffective. Things take longer and you forget things. Your memory's not that great. So if you're noticing anything around your mental performance, your emotional well-being, or your physical energy, pay attention to that, because the amount of pressure we're under, if we leave it for too long, we can create really long-term issues that can impact our overall well-being. And what can help mentally, emotionally, physically is, yes, getting rest, and we're going to look into 7 types of rest in a moment, but also the sense of wholeheartedness. So David Whyte is one of my favorite poets, and the one thing that COVID has brought me is a love for poetry, because there were times I went through things and I didn't know how to express them, but in poetry I could find that. And wholeheartedness is also spoken about quite beautifully, and I've got a quote to read from you a little bit later by Brené Brown. What I'd like us to do is look through 7 types of rest, because maybe you're getting lots of one but not enough of another. So as I go through them, if you've got pen and paper, perhaps jot down what they are. And once I've gone through all 7, I'm going to ask you, which one do you feel that you're doing amazing at? Which are you strong in? And is there one that you have a longing to have more of? Because that could potentially be an area of focus over the holidays, when most of us have a little bit more time for self-care. And self-care, which is part of helping us feel wholehearted, is so important. It's not selfish, it's essential. So in terms of these different types of rest, The first one that we need, and I'm sure you'll agree, is mental rest. So we have so much input coming into our minds, and this is especially important before we go to sleep, so that we can be not wired but so tired that we then can't actually fall asleep. So I'm going to share some ways that you can actually take a mental rest a little bit later. But this is where we give our minds a break, perhaps through mindfulness or just the ability to daydream. There's two neuroscientists called David Rock and Dan Siegel, who have done some phenomenal research and designed something called the Healthy Mind Platter. So if you want to have a healthy mind and avoid cognitive decline, there are some ingredients that are vital. There are also 7 ingredients on that platter, interestingly. And one of them is mental rest, but also the importance of daydreaming and creativity, which is another form of rest. So mental rest is one. Sensory rest is important. So a lot of us are spending more and more time on screens and devices. And without going too much into the science, we know that if you do that at night, it can reduce the melatonin that's produced in your mind, so make it harder for you to want to fall asleep. It overstimulates us. It could take us into the stress response, the fight or flight response. And so taking a break from these devices is really, really important. And also softening the amount of light that we have. So if you're struggling to sleep at night, something you could think about is the lighting in your home. So having softer lights, perhaps candles like the Fireside that we're around at the moment, figuratively speaking, and giving your eyes a chance to rest. David Whyte has a beautiful poem called Sweet Darkness, where he writes about his own experience of exhaustion and burnout. And he says, time to go into the dark. When your eyes are tired, the world is tired also. Time to go into the dark. So the importance of allowing ourselves to rest and soothe, because the eyes, the visual cortex, takes in so much. Then a third type of rest is emotional and social rest. They often go interlinked. And this can be quite difficult, especially around the holidays, where perhaps you feel obliged to spend time with people that maybe emotionally or could be quite draining. So that's where techniques that you can use to manage your state, despite what's going on around you, can become quite handy. And this is also important in terms of having boundaries and being able to give yourself permission to not always see everybody all the time. Like I mentioned, some weekends, this weekend, I'm having a very social weekend and I feel up to it. Last weekend, after all those road trips I did, and they all, like 3 of them ran late and I was on a flight that ran, it was just really stressful. I cancelled 2 engagements on the weekend. I can't. And if I push myself, I might get ill. I'm not going to show up authentically. So I took some emotional rest last weekend. I had to spend time on my own. So also acknowledging that we need that. And I think especially as carers or clinicians, we can often give a lot emotionally and socially and then not always get enough back. Another form of rest, like I mentioned by those 2 neuroscientists, they also agree with this. The brain needs creativity. So are you making time for art? And that can be building jigsaw puzzles, listening to music, journaling, reading things that are outside of your scope of work, spending time in nature, being able to just express yourself without having to always use your mind. So actually allowing art to do that. And then the third last form of rest is spiritual rest, which could also be a sense of meaning. So have you got a sense of belonging, as if you're part of something bigger? What is your own sense of purpose and why? And making time, I find, especially as we transition from a year end to a new year, this is a lovely time to think about that. You know, what kind of theme or intention do you want for the new year? Where have you got enough meaning or not enough? And a strong sense of belonging and purpose. Do you want to maybe give something back in terms of community? So that's also a very important form of rest. When I thought about this, it's what instigated me volunteering to be part of, I help with the nature spaces in my neighborhood. And I've met amazing people by doing that. And that's part of my spiritual rest and giving back to my community. Then, of course, we need physical rest, which is sleep, maybe power napping, but actually stopping. And we sleep a third of our lives for a reason. We absolutely need that. There's another form of physical rest, which is more active, where we actually maybe give ourselves the chance to have massage or to do stretching like yoga or Pilates or deep type of breathing, but it's where we're awake, but we're resting ourselves and helping our bodies, especially to release tension. So if those of you that are writing these down, you would have probably kept track of 7 things. So if I remind you of the 7 types of rest, we have active physical rest, which is massage, stretching, yoga, Pilates. Passive rest, which is sleep. We then have mental rest, emotional rest, sensory rest, creative rest, and spiritual rest, or a sense of meaning. Now, out of these 7, which one would you celebrate? And those of you who are here live and you'd like to share in the chat, which one are you good at? Which one do you feel that you have enough of? Maybe pop that into the chat. Or if you'd like to, perhaps just think about that for yourself. So which one are you, I'd like us to start with a celebration. Which do you feel strongest at? Mine at the moment would probably be my sense of meaning. Because the one thing COVID has shown me is that I love this work and I wouldn't want to be doing anything else. So I've got a deeper sense of meaning and connection with my work and my contribution to the world. I see somebody has shared mental, oh great, Kate, that's great. Sense of purpose, same as me, Amanda, and creative meaning. Wonderful. Now, is there one of these 7, not 6, just one that you have a longing for more of? Which one do you have a longing for more of? Mine at the moment is actually the active physical rest. I haven't been for a massage and I've got a bit of neck ache again in a long time, and I've compromised on stretching. I've been doing exercise, but not stretching. And I can feel it. It's been about 6 weeks and my back is not quite as supple and strain and tension free as it could be. So that's something I'm going to focus on, is do maybe 10 minutes of stretching in the morning. So if you've got an idea of what type of rest you need, and you keep a childlike curiosity about how you can find solutions to it, I think curiosity could solve a lot of issues. If we stay curious, we stay playful, we keep a growth mindset, and thank you for the shares that are coming through. We potentially think of, well, how can I be creative? How can I find ways to bring in art into my life? And now, if we're talking about what we want to do, which is get more rest in a particular area, then the question is, the next step is, well, how do I do that? And what I thought I would do is share a framework with you where I take the intelligence of the seasons and apply it to a 24-hour day. Because when we want to create new habits and shift the way that we are around creative rest or mental rest or how we approach wholeheartedness, what matters is how we put it into practice in our daily routines. And all of us are different. Some of us might have kids, some are not. Some of us live with partners, some don't, some have families. So let's take a look at the seasons, put them over a 24-hour day, and then let's see where you can potentially find space in your routine to maybe explore and be curious about how to get more of that rest. So when I say the seasons over a 24-hour day, if you think of spring is the early morning. As you wake up and become conscious that you're awake, then summer is your work day, and summer starts the moment that you potentially get pulled down the stress response. So you see something on WhatsApp or the news or social media, which you don't really have control over what's going to come into your space. Remember, through that mental input or sensory input, and then potentially you get upset or annoyed, or now you start working. That's summer. Then at the end of the day, there's a transition where, and that's fall or autumn, where we should, just like the days have become shorter, the nights get longer, leaves fall from the trees, and then we get into winter. Winter is when we're actually in bed and we're putting your head on the pillow and you want to sleep for the next, hopefully 7 to 9 hours, because that's what the experts reckon we all need. So let's take a look, starting in the early morning. So if we start with spring, this is when you wake up and you become conscious that you're awake. And remember, it ends the moment you reach for any device or engage with the outside world and you get news or social media or work input that will change your state, because you don't know what you're going to see. And how many of us wake up in the mornings using our phones as an alarm clock, And then within minutes, potentially, we're looking at overnight WhatsApps, or we're jumping onto Facebook out of habit, or Instagram. And the danger with that is when you wake up in the morning, your nervous system is probably, if you've had a good night's rest, I struggle with insomnia sometimes. But even then, when I wake up in the morning, I'm probably the most rested and calm. My nervous system is probably in its window of tolerance. The more it's going to be compared to any other time of day. But if I jump out of that without connecting with myself first, I'll then start engaging with the outside world, saying, oh, I like that, or I don't like that, or I'm so annoyed by that message, or somebody else sent you an issue, another fire that you've got to put out. And then you get pulled into all these different kind of agendas. And Brene Brown, some of you may know her work. She's a phenomenal researcher, and I value a lot of her work. I'm really excited. I've ordered her new book that arrives tomorrow, Atlas of the Heart. And she speaks about how we immediately then put on these masks and armors, and we start showing up in a way that's inauthentic. And that's an issue, because then we're not properly connecting with our emotions. And what we suppress, the body will express, often in very inelegant ways. So it's important to make time to connect with ourselves. And in the morning, we generally have more time to do this than many of us would potentially give ourselves credit for. So I'm going to pop this question into the chat, and I'd like you to think about it. If anything were possible, how would you start your day? And this is quite a personal question. I mean, if you'd like to share in the chat, you're welcome to. And I love giving my clients and even myself opportunity to dream, to think of the unimaginable. Because if I were to start my day, on my terms, I'd have 2, maybe 3 hours to myself before I had to work. And then I would do all the things that make me happy. I'd spend time outdoors, I'd go for a walk, I'd meditate, and then I'd go into my day. Because I love my work so much that once I start working, it's really hard for me to do any of those things at the end of the day. So I'm far better in the beginning of the day. So if you think about when you go on holiday, what are the things that you love to do? And I know that we can't all take 3 hours at the start of our days. But sometimes just setting the intention and maybe creating an extra 5 minutes to your spring, or maybe making it just 15 or 20 minutes longer, can add such a sense of balance and rejuvenation and help you restore a sense of more wholeheartedness. And if you can't do 2 or 3 hours, like Kate, I think you've got little ones too, whatever you're starting with right now, like how long was your spring? I want to say this morning, but I don't know if that's fair to ask because it's a Saturday. But generally on a weekday, how long is your spring? Because I'd like to promote that each of us have at least an hour of spring in the morning before you let the outside world in. Because if you look at how much time we're switched on when we're in this summer mode, busy bees, going, we absolutely need a little bit of buffer at the beginning and the end of our days. And while we're working, I spoke about ideas of ways that you can get mental rest. And I use these 3. So I don't know if any of you are using these, or perhaps you have your own. The 20-20-20 guideline is every 20 minutes, look 20 feet away from your screen. So look far away from your screen and blink for 20 seconds. So give yourself a little bit of a break in terms of eye strain, but that also gives you a mental break without stopping or leaving your desk. So I know a lot of you are spending lots of time behind screens. Looking away from your screen 2 or 3 times an hour is a great place to start. Then remember that mindful minute. Could you give yourself a minute or 2 every hour to just, even if you just stretch and release some of the tension around your upper body and shoulders, perhaps alternate between sitting and standing, going up and getting a glass of water. Working and living from home has pros and cons. The cons is that the lines between work and home life can be quite blurred. But the pros is that we actually could go to the kitchen. The issue is, do we have a snack accident or do we hydrate and have a break, And then taking time in the middle of your day, pretending that you're French or Italian, perhaps not Spanish, because the Spanish will take probably 2 hours off for lunch, but having a moment away from screens where you're not distracted in the middle of your day can make a huge difference in how you feel in the afternoon. So these small little things that we do can help us to really slow down the stress response. And there's research to show that this really works. Microsoft released a brilliant paper looking at brainwave activity and how when they look at individuals who have back-to-back screen times and meetings, the beta brainwaves kept on increasing. So that's an indication of stress in the brain. Whereas people who took short breaks in between, the beta brainwave activity did not accumulate throughout the day. So this is not woo-woo kind of wishy-washy stuff. This really does work in terms of managing productivity and performance. But no one's going to do this for you. We need to do it ourselves. And like Amanda shared, prioritize things that are important to us. And probably one of the hardest, most challenging seasons is the end of the day. How do we create enough slowdown and wind down so that when we get to bed, we actually are rested enough to sleep? Because some of us go at 70 or 80 miles an hour. And then at the end of the day, we want to just immediately stop in the garage, metaphorically speaking, just stop this car, this body, this vehicle that's carried you at such a speed. And then it's no wonder many of us are not getting the rest that we need. We wake up in the middle of the night, our cortisol's up and down, we can't get back to sleep, or we struggle to fall asleep. So how are you transitioning? What is your autumn, your fall like at the end of the day? And this is where those of you that mentioned wanting to bring in creative rest, perhaps you could bring in just the gift of giving yourself 15 minutes of reading, or building a jigsaw, or doing some kind of new art. I'm not artistic at all, but I can follow numbers. And so I started doing paint by numbers and sticking little shiny things into a picture where it's all number based. And I go totally into the state of flow, which is really good for the brain. And it's fun and easy. And then I end up with a beautiful shiny picture that I would never have done on my own. The challenge is this, right? We've all got these devices around us, and there will always be emails to answer and messages and things. I mean, if you haven't seen the documentary Social Dilemma on Netflix, has anybody watched that who's on the call? And if you have, would you recommend that others watch it? Social Dilemma, where they speak about how addictive the internet and everything related to it is because of the dopamine kicks that we get. It's a very powerful documentary. And that's not going to go away. I mean, I was listening to the Wreath lectures, which were released by the BBC earlier this month about artificial intelligence. And, if we think about what's coming, I've really got to regulate my breath to maintain my calm, despite what I might be thinking. So this means knowing where potentially you can be a little bit more boundaried around screens. And if one place you look at, if you aren't doing this, is before you go to bed, can you gift yourself half an hour to an hour of no screens? Because that can have a huge impact in helping your nervous system slow down so that when you get into bed, you're actually able to hibernate, to fall asleep, and go down from beta brainwave to alpha, to theta, to delta, deep brainwave, experience dreams, which are important for emotional regulation, and then wake up feeling more neutral and calm, able to connect with yourself. And it's the small things that we do consistently that have the biggest impact. I always say consistency over intensity. So as we're kind of approaching, wrapping up what I've been sharing with you. So this is the second last question I'm going to ask you to think about. And those of you that would like to share in the chat, please feel free to. When you reflect on the seasons, so spring, summer, autumn, and winter, which time of day do you have a longing to be stronger in, or to have more of, or to be more competent in? For me at the moment, it's my early mornings, because I have compromised a bit on that time. My wind down seems to be quite good. I think because I am saying no to some social engagements, so my evenings are feeling more spacious. And now if you reflect on that time of day, like for instance, Kate has shared spring, so the morning for her, is there one small thing that you could do soon, tomorrow, Monday or Tuesday? Because the sooner you act on something, the easier it is to create a bit of a habit behind it. And could that relate to one of the 7 types of rest that you have a longing for more of? So could you bring that in at that time of day? Maybe it's a little decadent bath at the end of the day, or lying down on the sofa and listening to one piece of music. It's much better for you to do something every day for 3 or 5 minutes than it is to do it once a week for half an hour. So very small declarations can be really important. I love the ideas that are coming through And this is trial and error, right? It's not always going to be easy. We're not always going to get it right. You know, we have expectations about how things are going to go, like it's going to be linear and we're just going to get there. But in reality, some days will be great, some weeks will be great, some won't be. And I think about staying compassionate is so important. Great, Bridget. Just a few in-bed stretches. I love that. Before you even get up, I've got some breathing techniques that I do while I'm lying in bed that help me wake up and give me something to do besides reach for my phone too quickly. There's a lovely art form, a Japanese art form called kintsugi. And it teaches us how imperfection and getting things wrong is actually beautiful. So the art form is about if something of value, like a vase or a ceramic jar or a bowl, is broken, instead of the pieces being discarded and thrown away, they are actually put together very masterfully in this technique of kintsugi by using a lacquer that contains gold. And the cracks and where it broke is highlighted by the lacquer. So they're not hidden with this clear adhesive. It's actually, they highlight where it was cracked and broken. And the items that have gone through this technique are esteemed of higher value than the original artifact. Isn't that beautiful that when something is highlighted in its imperfection, where it was broken is brought up and prized? It's as if in our imperfection and vulnerabilities, we are esteemed of higher value. And one thing I've noticed, certainly in the workspace that I work in, is that there is more vulnerability and sharing and understanding that we are holistic beings, that we can't just and shouldn't just always pretend everything is okay when it isn't, but rather find techniques and understand where and when we're out of that window of tolerance, and then have things that we can do to help us, and then potentially as leaders in our fields, impact and help others. So I think I'm going to wrap it up there, and I'm going to ask, some of you have shared quite specifically what it is you're going to do differently. And what I'd like to know is, has anything in particular been insightful for you today? Has anything sparked your curiosity? So you can share that, or you could share, how are you feeling right now? How are you feeling? We don't often ask about how we feel. We always think about what we need to get done. Something I do for myself in the morning is I ask, how do I want to feel today? Not just what do I want to do or tick off my checklist. So as Kate shared, all those great tips around reducing stress in terms of the kitchen and cooking, think about, how do you want to feel while you're preparing those meals? Playful, curious, grounded, calm, happy. Because setting that intention is more than halfway of actually getting there. And then, if we connect our head, our heart, and our gut in terms of how we act and show up in the world, what action are you going to take based on your investment of time and energy here around the fireside today? So some of you have shared some very specific ideas. This is where you get to think about your personal pledge. So what is an action that you're going to take? Or has something sparked your curiosity that you'd like to maybe just read and explore more of? What is that one thing going to be? And if you're happy to pop that into the chat, there's something quite powerful about a public declaration of something that you're going to do for yourself and to be witnessed. I do believe that we transform most when we are witnessed. And Amanda, Kate, and myself are here to witness you and to support each other, because in the collective, there's a lot of wisdom and support and encouragement, because not all of us are going to be getting this all right all the time, but how lovely when we can be there to help one another, blow a little bit of oxygen onto a fire that might be a bit low, or maybe help one calm down if it's a bit burning too bright. And as we go into the last, I think there's 19 days left of the year, and if you listen to this recording, there'll be even less, to not wish them away. A lot of people have been saying, I just wish it was 2022. But if we do that, then we're just going to wish away all the days of our lives, potentially. It's not easy. We certainly are on one crazy adventure. Stay curious. The small things matter. Think of your daily routine and how the intelligence of the season can help you either through spring, summer, autumn, or winter. And when you're feeling like you're in a dark winter, figuratively speaking, to know that the seasons pass and that in that process you can and will find potentially an invincible summer in your heart. And Mary Oliver, who's another poet that I've discovered during COVID, says, keep some room in your heart for the unimaginable. To make time to dream, to daydream, to get bored, to sit without a screen, to come together around actual fires and candles and talk and connect, or just breathe. Remember, we started off with your breath. How is your breath in this moment as we wrap up? What would it be like if you took a little deeper inhale and filled a little bit more of your belly so your whole lungs took in some oxygen? And what if you allowed your exhale to soften a little bit of tension around your shoulders or your jaw or your neck? And then I'm going to stop sharing there and invite Amanda back. And I see there's a question in the chat.
Go ahead. Go ahead and answer Jacqueline's question.
So the poet I like, I might have a little crush on him, to be honest, is David White. He's an Irish poet, and one day he does these walking tours through Tuscany, Amanda. And
Let's go.
You spend a week discussing poetry and philosophy. Yeah, so there's David White and Mary Oliver are the two that I mean, there's a few others, but I especially like their work. And Brene Brown is just extraordinary.
Yes, she's been interviewed. I've heard her being interviewed more and more. Well, she's always interviewed, but here in the States, because of her new book, Atlas of the Heart, she has a huge following, I think, globally. And yes, so if you've not.
And also very practical. So I like her, you know.
She is. Yeah. She's been there and done that. You know, she's not lofty at all. She's very, compassionate. You know, one thing and then I have some questions for the audience. Those are colleagues and friends listening in, and Kate, join us too, unless you need to hide on the couch here. It's tough when you're juggling the little boy too, right? Here she is. One thing I've learned from you, Celynn, because I've known you quite a long time, and it's super cool because we're all on different time zones, is that Celynn will leave a WhatsApp voice message. She will talk the message instead of typing it, which is really neat, because Kate and I will type to each other a lot, and we are constantly typing, right? Or on our phone somehow or other, answering things. And I know there's a point in time with you, Celynn, that I know you've put your phone down, and obviously there's a time difference, but what is really neat is that we've forgotten how to leave voicemails or messages. Yeah. But you can say an awful lot more, right? And
pick up tone, and you know, there's some things that are fine for a written note, but I find I've longed for connection, and hearing a person's voice is lovely. Yeah, exactly.
And Kate surprised me the other day because she did leave me a voice message. I said, wait, we should do this more often. Well, it was because we had a scheduling mishap between the two of us, which was fine. But I'm like, oh, we just need to do this. So you're right. The voice, we're hidden behind screens. We're hidden behind letters. And yet the one thing, when I was talking with your colleague in Paris the other day, David, who has a wonderful podcast, by the way, everyone will mention his name too. You know, he asked me something along the lines of, what is the one thing you wish you could do every day? It was a different question than that. Where would you most like to be? I said, sitting in a brasserie in Paris, you know, with a glass of wine or croque monsieur or something. And it wasn't about the food or the wine. It was because it was a connectivity that I've always known, which we know in Europe. And I think around the world, that's been ripped away from us in the last 2 years, that, you know, the ability to commune in many different levels. So
may I use that as an example? Because that's a beautiful way of imagining the unimaginable and dreaming. So you can't be in Paris in an actual bistro right now. I mean, I've just canceled my trip to Paris for next week. So I know it's quite difficult. What you could do, until you can do that, is play French bistro music in the morning when you make it. You've got your husband who was making an espresso before we started. So it's not, I'm not suggesting it replaces Paris.
No, but
by dreaming it, you might think of ways that you can bring a little bit of the essence of what that brings to you into your life now.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's interesting that I'm going to get off the stage because I want to ask a couple of questions. But, you know, for me, when you were asking what seasons you need to focus in on, it is fall, because of stopping work and not, you know, just taking that time And one of the last things I did personally before the whole COVID shutdown, I was in Australia and was able to hear Breakfast at Tiffany's, that incredible movie, with a live orchestra set. So the Sydney Symphony Orchestra played the music along with the film score, to the film score. It was incredible. So to your point about you can transport yourself, I like that. So you can play your music, do your art. And yeah, what about you, Kate? Where are you transported to?
Definitely the end of the day, I'm fine with that. Autumn and winter side is fine. It's, for me, it's definitely the spring side that I need to, if I could just stay in bed for hours, it would such a kind of dormouse in the morning. So I need to kind of rearrange my mornings, I think, in the week to get more out of them before I start work. But I was good at it, and I seem to have not got good at it. So I need to readdress something there, definitely.
We all need nudging along the way.
We do.
We really do.
All of us, is no one perfect. You know, I wrote down some things here, and I was curious to ask everyone listening in. You know, we would take, here's my lots of notes. I always take notes from Celynn. I want to learn every time. I have 2 pages, but you wrote some things. And I wondered what stood out to anyone listening in. You said right at the beginning, you can't read a book and be well. In other words, you can't read your way to wellness. It's like, it has dimensions, and yet there's plenty of books, we've all read them, right? I mean, they can invoke ideas, your imagination, give you advice, but it is a physical act, I guess, or a spiritual act. It's more than just reading, it's dimensional.
Absolutely. And when we do, we realize some things work and some don't. And I think extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. So right now we need to be open-minded and try things that you may never have tried before. You can't sleep and you might not like the idea of a weighted blanket. Give it a try, because our stress, the impact of long-term stress can change the way that our body feels. And so, yeah, looking at how we approach our own self-care and how we rest with a sense of curiosity and creativity is important.
Absolutely. The other thing you said, and I wrote it down, 2 things, a window of tolerance and wholeheartedness. And I thought they're just things I wrote down, just phrases, things to think about, which I found really appealing. Did anybody else write anything down? Did anything like jump out at you? Just words, you're like, oh, that's cool. That brings up something in me. I can imagine that. Anyway.
What we suppress, the body will express. You know, we know this. I teach this to my clients, but it's so beautifully worded. It was just like, oh, that's just such a simplistic little sentence that is just, it just frames it all, really.
It really does, at a physiological level, spiritual, everything, right? I mean, we see that in your biochemistry, we feel it in our own physiology. So brilliant. Yes. So I don't know if anybody else wrote down notes, so you're probably just basking in the glory of listening to Celynn. So Jacqueline said, yes, that, and the kintsugi, that was amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I used to do a creative mosaicing as an art in South Africa, but I stopped that 5 years ago. And I'm thinking next year I'm going to make a plan. Even though I don't have a lot of space, I'm going to think of how I can do some mosaicing. So the kintsugi, and I'm drawn to Japan as well. The more I read about it, the more I think it's such a beautiful art form, and what it symbolizes is powerful.
Well, and I may be completely wrong. Who gave us Tai Chi in the world, this incredible movement form? I will mix up my culture, so I won't pin it down, but that's that's a movement of putting things together too, sort of in space and balance.
And Okinawa is a longevity hotspot.
Exactly.
I mean, you speak about that in the journal, in your book. Yeah,
no, exactly. No, thank you, Jacqueline. The kintsugi was amazing. It makes me think in Athens, at the Greek museum in Athens, what they've actually done is being able, this is not through artificial intelligence, they've kind of done a reverse form of kintsugi, right? Kintsugi. But
I don't speak Japanese. I think it's kintsugi.
Kintsugi, yeah. They've actually been able to take, these incredible statues that have been broken for thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, and be able to show you what they actually look like visually. So visual technology. So it's like putting the pieces together again to create this whole, but letting you know where the breaks were. So it's absolutely incredible to see. So
Yeah, because they could put it back together and not show where the breaks are. I used to do that if I broke like my favorite mug. I would try and stick it back without it showing. Yeah. So the concept's
it's
powerful.
embracing. I want to finish, Celynn, by asking you, there is an app. There are a lot of apps out there, breathing apps, Calm-Me and what have you, but you shared one with me from the UK, which I think is really interesting for people to listen to, because you can have a free trial, right? And it's a different forms of breathing, which was amazing. Healing Hub, right, by Nikki Owen.
And I use, well, inside the Healing Hub, there's two types of breathing techniques. There's one called hypno meditations, which you can use at night to soothe your nervous system. And then in the morning, I use the technique called breathing space, which is a combination of open mouth breath work to get lots of oxygen into your bloodstream,
Right.
and then the breath hold, which then activates the parasympathetic balancing, and then the primal releasing, which is the fun. You get to throw a tantrum in bed and you punch. You've got to be careful if you've got somebody in the bed with you. They might be a bit concerned.
Yeah, not so great.
And then there's these lovely binaural beat 8D music.
It's cool.
It's that I do it 3 or 4 times a week. I've been doing it for almost 2 years now.
Yeah, yes.
A lovely
It
tool.
is neat. And you see, for me, that's something I have to work on, because I haven't made enough time to. I've kind of popped in and done it and popped out. And so, yeah, this is my autumn. This is like that creative.
What a nice way to end your day and you can do a 15-minute little practice of that. Lovely.
Exactly.
Lovely.
So yeah, Nikki Owen, she's wonderful. She's British. She's a great voice like you, Celynn. And yeah, really enjoy her. So Celynn, I've known you, and Kate, I've known you a long time. Kate's got to know you, but Celynn, you have something called just to come to an end here, the WELLBEING Clubhouse.
Yeah, I do.
Which is really cool. Talk to us about that. And
It's an online community, so it's a way for people to engage with me and my approach through monthly masterclasses and some online content that I've created that use my philosophies, which include celebration and connection and curiosity. Because my work is in the workspace, and I often get people saying, but what if we want more than what our organization is bringing you in for? So that's why I designed the Wellbeing Clubhouse.
yeah, it's really cool.
And
So
then that's on my website. Yeah.
and we'll put that. Why don't you put your website in here? We'll
Sure.
put it anyway. We'll put that in the notes, the email afterwards. So, but yes, if you've enjoyed Celynn, we always do. There it is. You can find the Wellbeing Clubhouse. It's amazing. I've been in and out. I haven't been in quite of late, but of course I am always watching for your masterclasses.
Yeah. And I think knowing that there's like here today, that there's a community that we can tap into, we need more of this.
We do.
Yeah, authentic connection, a time to pause, stop, reflect, integrate, release so that we don't suppress things in a place that feels safe and you can just show up as you are.
Exactly. So I hope everyone who's still with us, you've enjoyed listening to Kate, help de-stress the space with really super practical tips, and wait for the rest coming tomorrow. They're yummy. I will send them directly to you, Celynn, right afterwards. But I hope you enjoyed this, this time, enjoyed Kate, enjoyed listening to Celynn. You'll be able to find her if you can't hear. We'll put, again, her contact information, the website, in our email tomorrow. But Kate, any parting thoughts for you as darkness descends in the UK and sunlight abounds here in the USA?
I want to thank Celynn for such a really fascinating and interesting talk that she's given. It was, I do quite a lot of stuff in the well-being world that I listen to. I mean, I don't actually do it myself, but it was really lovely. I really, really thoroughly enjoyed that. There's some wonderful tips in there, and that I hope everybody, manages to enjoy what is coming with the festive period, and enjoys the recipes when they arrive as well. And just to wish everyone a happy Christmas and a happy festive winter.
Absolutely, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And if you reach out and listen to the recording, you will know where to find us. But onwards with your evening in Europe and onwards with our mornings here in early afternoons in the United States. So thank you, everyone. And thank you, Celynn. And of course,
Thank you.
Kate, always. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Dante,
Bye-bye.
bye.
Bye.
Bye.